Hello, everybody. We have an exciting session today. We're going to be looking at the artist I saw at Northumberland this year. And the artist's name is Mick Oxley. You can Google his work. He lives in Northumberland by the coast. And I was especially fascinated about his watercolors of the waves of these lovely atmospheric landscapes and how he creates the dramatic scene, the dramatic skies, lovely transparent lit up water, the waves in the most fresh and exciting way. Now these works were quite large. They were probably about 50 by 60 centimeters before the mount and the frame comes in. And I thought they were just so excitingly done. So I thought we'll give it a go to study the artist technique. So the plan for the session is, so we have three different paintings. 1, 2, 3. So we'll do these two images on A3. You're very welcome to do it in a smaller format. You might want to do 2 halves, maybe divide your A4 paper into half and do 2 smaller pieces. And then maybe do another one slightly larger. The only reason for it, I want everything to be runny. So if you tend to not use a lot of water, don't be scared of starting smaller. Or if you'll do your first A4 piece of paper and it feels like everything is drying too quickly for you, feel free to swap the size of the paper, okay? Just have a feel for it. The reason we're doing 3 pieces of work today is because it's going to be very fast flowing and the technique is done very quick. We'll practice on the first one. We'll maybe take it a little bit more steady and practice some elements. And then we'll be just doing top of this kind of painting the sky and then the water. Sky, water, very quick flowing work. So for the paintings for today, we'll need also a palette knife. Where's my palette knife? Here it is. Okay, or plastic old bank card if you don't have a palette knife. Something we can lift the surface quite easily. What else do we need? Loads of paper towels and some spare paper just in case if you need to use it as well as some of the textures. Right, before we get started painting, on my scrap piece of paper, just in practice paper, just want to test some of the colors, okay? So I'll need maybe a medium brush just to get some of the colors identified. So I'll need some sort of grays. Grays could be made out of indigo and black, and then indigo and violet. So let's just put those colors on our paper so we know what they are. Okay, so this is my fresh violet. I wouldn't need it's going fresh. I'll go and mix it with some black. So this is my black. Actually, I already probably mixed a tiny bit with my violet. Okay, so that's my black. I'm just diluting it gently so you can see it a bit better. Okay, and if I'll mix it with my violet, I'll have a nice violet-y. I'm just going to make it lighter so you can see it better in color. Okay. Maybe keep it very light just to, again, just to show that grayness of it. And then I'll do the same black and indigo. So let's find some indigo first. Okay, where's my indigo? There we go. Some nice indigo here. Again, if I'll just make it tiny bit pale so you can see the color better. And then I can mix my indigo with some black. And again, it looks solid, and we will need quite a lot of solid dark colors. I'm just making it again lighter so you can see it better. So then it's a difference between that, a little bit of warmth in it from violet and more coolness into this gray from the indigo. We will need a lot of very strong color today as well, as we'll be painting on a damp surface. So try to be able to reach for that depths of color, so picking up that pigment. Sometimes using tubes watercolors for that is good as well, because you can go into the very strong color. Right, and for the bottom part, for the sea, most of our seas will have similar colors there. We're going to add, let's add to our, let's make an experiment. Let's mix indigo with some yellow. I think that might be our color. That's the one. So if I'll put it on the paper here as a fresh cadmium yellow. Okay, that's looking green because I already got my paint, my brush in my indigo. Okay, so okay, that's not gonna come out super fresh, but that's my yellow. And if I mix it with my indigo, I'm gonna have all these lovely colors. The more indigo lead, the darker greener, kind of darker bluer color it's going to have. And we're also going to use cadmium yellow, indigo, and a small amount of violet. Okay, that's quite a lot of violet. Just touching up, adding up the other colors back. Okay, let's do a bit more. Again, yellow, maybe yellow and some fresh violet. Okay, so there will be some of those colors, which is quite interesting as well. So mainly we have three colors: violet, indigo, cadmium yellow, and then we've got black or neutral black, any of the blacks. And let's recap on how we're painting things on a wet surface. Maybe just watch me at this stage, or feel free to go parallel with me. When we'll do the actual paintings, we'll do it step by step. I'll do a section, you'll do a section, okay? So I'll need a big brush to make the surface damp. So this is just how to work a little bit faster, just to practice a quick amount. So I'm probably doing about a couple of inches width just of plain water. I'll need to pick up a larger brush to paint quite quickly over it. So I'm going to use any of these colors. I'm probably going to start with the indigo and black. So I have some indigo. Okay, I can paint the whole landscape, the whole kind of that wet section in indigo. And then I'll go very strong amount of quite quick volume of black and indigo, very not hardly any water. unless your paint feels it can't go and spread anywhere. And then with that super concentrated paint, I'm going to touch up the darker sections to create some of the sky. Okay, that's how dark it will need to be. And these lines will play with the lines of them later on. As dark as you can get. Okay, let's give that one a go. Let's give that one a go. And what happens on the water here? Let's do a big experiment. Let's do exactly the same thing. So some water first. So I've got some fresh water touching the surface from above. If things are running, that's fine. And then I'll go for cadmium yellow mixed with indigo. So basically I haven't washed my brush and I just put some cadmium yellow on my brush. Okay, so this could have quite a lot of water on. This is quite a nice effect, yeah. And so I'm going to put some of that color over. While it's still runny, if you just watch me for a moment, while it's still runny, I'll put some fresh cadmium yellow into the painting. I can even put a bit of extra fresh water in there. We'll have a larger scale, so it will be a little bit easier for us to handle it. Well, from my point of view, it's easier to work on a larger scale. And then I'm going to go for indigo and black, nice and concentrated. I might touch up the sky there, and then I'll do a few strokes with some less as dark color, add a couple of strokes close to the horizon, maybe one at the front. And then the rest is going to be done with a palette knife. Well, scratch very quickly some shapes, almost as if I'm lifting the butter off the toast. Okay. Scooping those strokes. Everything is reflecting for you folks, sorry. You can also use, if it doesn't lift good enough for you with a palette knife, use a little bit of the paper towel, but just be careful so you're not ending up with two similar shapes. And you can drag a paper towel, just maybe the edge of it, just very gently, to create some interesting patterns. That will give you a little bit more softer textures. There's some sharper lines at the background. Those ones will need to be done much later. Drawing with kitchen towel, just with the edge of it, not a thick edge as we normally would do, but just a roughened up, very, very thin layer, just touching the surface will create much more softer marks for us. Right, if I'll lift this one up, hopefully you'll see it a bit better. So it's quite straightforward. So if needed, just do some smaller samples like these rather than doing the bigger ones. If you'll do first together as an A4 paper, hopefully you'll get the logic of it, and all will be experimenting those variations of mark making, variations of how wet the surface is. Okay. Right, so we're ready to get started on our first study. So first of all, I'm going to do first half of the paint in the sky, and I'm going to give you time to do it. So just watch me first. This goes very quickly. So I have some fresh, clean water in one of my pots. I'm using a big brush to just get the paper wet up to my line of horizon. If I'll go lower by accident, maybe use a tissue to dry it, but that gives me an option of not to go too low with the color. Okay, the color will stop where my wet patch will stop. So step 1 is done. Now I'm going to get some violet, and we decided to go for a little bit of violet and black. So that's going to be my violet and black here. I'm going to add a bit more water first, so it's going to be a paler color. So this is, I can test it here. So it's pale in comparison to my darks. And I'm going to go very quickly painting the whole section. I could have done it with a very big brush as well, but I want to keep it clean for the moment. Making sure you're going over the masking tape. Okay, all nice and wet there. And then I'm going to load my brush with some indigo very quickly. Okay, this keeps moving. Indigo and some black. And I'm going to do this lovely, exciting stroke at the top. Okay, maybe it's coming out quite dark, then maybe the artist's work, but that's okay. Just don't want the lines to be all the same, so I just made them slightly different inside. There is another one somewhere here. And for the bottom darkness, I think there's some extra violet and indigo and black. So I'm not washing my brush. If there's some indigo, that's brilliant as well. And then I'm going to come close to my cloud here. Anything else needed to be done here. And I'm painting a very dark tone, hardly any water, and it's solid. That's the effect we're going to get if the color comes out. So I've done a couple of strokes. I topped up my color because it gets diluted by all the lights, all the water present. Okay, if I'll just pick up some of the moisture from the bottom, then I can show you, I can lift it up so it's not reflecting for you here as well. Okay, let's give that one a go. Part now. So now I'm ready to paint the bottom part of the painting. First of all, I need my brush and my big brush to paint all the bottom section with water. I'm touching up the previous layer. So if it's running, it's running. I need it damp, not just super soaking. Well, super soaking wet is fine, as long as it's not overwhelmingly running down. Okay. Now I don't need to wash my brush. I'm just adding a tiny bit more water to it. It already has all the indigo and black. All I need is some cadmium yellow. I'm going to add more yellow on my brush. It's a mucky type of nice greeny type of color here. Just getting more and more moisture for it so I can get it lighter. And then I'm going to paint all of it here. And again, I'm going to top up some fresh yellow as I go from my palette directly. Can come close to the horizon. I'm going to let it settle, and I'll go for the darker blue. So again, I've got my nice puddle of darkness here, so I can drop it a tiny bit more down close to the horizon. Okay, looks like a nice darkness of the wave, so maybe I'll just put a bit of darkness here. And there is a nice shape of darkness of the waves on the foreground on the left. I'm not worried about it because I'm going to be using my palette knife right this moment. So this is a sharper wave on the right hand side. So I'm going to create that shape there. If it's still running, maybe for next piece of work I need to have tiny bit less water, and I can just go over my wave again. And over the other shapes, I would like to try using tissue paper. I know I can do my waves with a palette knife, but I haven't done them much with tissue paper. Maybe I can use some of the softness and then use just the edge of the tissue, that's very thin edge, while the paper is still very wet, and that gives you nice and soft lines before we do all the sharp again with the tissue. So in comparison to the palette knife mark, these will stay slightly lighter, slightly softer. I think I want a combination of them. Okay, so I'm almost sketching now with this tissue. If I need to turn it around, have nice pointy edges to the waves. Again, that's probably tells me how much water I need to use next time. Maybe a tiny bit less. It's nice and soft. And I think I'm going to give it a go now with the palette knife on top of the surface. So I have got some softness, and I'm also going to create more sharper whites. Scraping the surface a little bit more stronger. I'm going to try to keep my wave shapes more elongated rather than overly pointy. Okay, so that surface is too sharp, so I can just soften it with a tissue. And maybe I can do a tiny bit more higher marks for the waves here. And then finally, some of those elongated diagonal lines. Depends on the quality of your paper. Sometimes you can have marks more pronounced, sometimes marks a little bit more softer. Now, if I keep working into this area, I can start having more and more lighter tones, but I want some darkness. So I think I'll just add some extra darkness with a brush. That's what will give me a nice depth. Maybe a tiny bit more darker here as the paint settles in. And maybe somewhere next to my wave on the right hand side. Any of those variations are absolutely fine. And then again, if I need something in between, I've got some of my pale grays here, or some of those diluted yellows. I can just mingle some of them back. Okay, maybe a little bit overworked on the front, but something to practice on. Okay. Nice and soft. And then finally, I'll do a line for the horizon. I can do it when it's dry, when the paper is dry, or I can do it now by just scratching the horizon line, depending how straight your line could be. Mine is a little bit wobbly because I'm sitting between my tripod. Okay, That's something quite nice. I just made that even line. I'm quite happy with that. Right, first of all, I know I'm using 3 colors in black, but I also need to make sure that I have got some space in my palette where I can always know those colors are my pure colors. Okay, it's lovely to have palette colors and use them, but it's also good to know where your fresh ones, when the colors still have maybe more violet in them, more blue in them, more yellow in them. Okay, so for the next painting, the difference is that we have probably more even proportion of sky and water, maybe a little bit more of sky. But with the sky, what I'd like us to do this time, going to be the same principle. It's going to have slightly different amount of dark on the sky. And we'll also put the paper upwards to create some of the runniness to happen into the clouds. And we also might help ourselves with a little bit of tissue lifting the color as well. So let's give that one a try and see how it goes. So again, let's do the sky first before we practice and talk through the water. I'll just drop it down a tiny bit more and you can see better here as well. So again, I'm going to paint. If you want to divide your piece into 2 halves and draw with a pencil your line, so then you know how far to go with your colors. I'm going to do that. So tiny bit more space for the sky. All the rest is the water. Okay. So I'm going to paint with some water my sky. Depends how much water you'll put. If it's soaking wet and it's all runny and we keep reintroducing the moisture, the colors will start running down and create you interesting patterns. If you use much more drier surface, the colors will stay where they've been placed and will just stay soft but not runny. Right, so I'm gonna go still for similar violet and black first, but I'm going to keep it paler. So I'm going to paint the top of the piece with all of that color. If you go for violet and indigo, it's fine as well. I think it's probably more of a color on the painting. Okay, and now I'm going to go for very strong indigo. I think there's some violet in there as well. Indigo and black. And I'm going to start from the dark corner here, from the left or from the right. And it looks like an interesting mark, almost like a mountain shape. I quite like that. So I'm going to repeat a similar one with a little bit more violet here. And nice and strong in darkness. I think my paints already started running. If I don't want them to run vertically, I want them to run a bit more diagonally. I can lift my board diagonally and let's give it a moment to settle into that direction. I can see what happens there. I'll just drop my board a little bit lower to probably 1.5 inches height from 4 inch. Now I can paint my darker tone on the bottom part of the piece. Okay, I can't quite fit it on the screen here. Okay, so my paper is drying slowly. I need to be working quicker. So all of this one is settling in. And I need some more solid black. And this time around, Just a tiny bit of water on this corner because it's very dry. I think I'm good to turn my paper upside down and just let it settle the other way around. Okay, can't quite see it as much because my board has been differently proportioned. Some of this one removed. So just a few moments, it starts settling in the opposite direction. And now I can turn it back. So there are loads of movements going on. And then if I wanted to give extra light to the painting of the clouds there, I can use if I'll put a tiny bit of water on my tissue, so I'm not lifting too much. I'm almost lifting softer marks. So a bit of water on my tissue. Maybe a bit more. So I'm almost like semi-introducing water, semi-lifting some of the shapes. I just need to change the corner because I'm starting dragging the color rather than lifting it. Those are quite exciting effects. I might use them to maybe do something here as well. Less is more, don't forget that. I quite like that. Maybe slightly different to what I intended, but I quite like that. And then I think I need more solid indigo and black. I think for the bottom part of the painting here, it's ever since start drying, slightly lighter. So I want that permanent darkness. And then it's good settling. Anyhow, it settles in. So the top part is done. It's quite nice and whispery shapes I ended up with. So I watered the tissue. Okay, this just stayed a little bit too odd on its own. So rotating the paper from one side to another, from one angle to another is a tool in itself. Using a wet tissue paper, lifting some of the sections is good as well to try. If it's going to end up all a big mess, it doesn't matter. I want you to give it a try. Right, so for my section below the sky, I'm going to do a slightly different approach. I'm going to work with some dark color first, same indigo straight away on a dry surface because it's only a couple of strokes here. So I'm going to do some indigo on the left-hand side, indigo and black, sorry, indigo and black on the left-hand side, and more fresh indigo, so it will start to look blue. Or you can even put your brush in one of your blues as of the painting. Okay, I just want to keep the concentrated color strong. So we've got some indigo and black. Okay, if I've got some white gaps, I need to make sure I cover them. And for the bottom part, I'm going to add more blue or just fresh indigo. I think blue will be quicker for me. So somewhere here, I'll add some blue because my brush is not clean. It's going to mix together anyway. Okay. Now at this stage, I'll go very quickly with some water. The reason I'm doing the water, so I can also see not going to have any sharp edges for my darks. And then I'm going to wash my brush slightly and go for cadmium yellow. I can go straight away immediately. Might leave some of these whites here. Maybe they will help me out with lifting later on. So yellow and any colors which my brush will pick. That's quite nice that white was left. Maybe tiny bit more darkness on the edge here. I can introduce black and indigo. Okay, just a little bit more of a curvature here as well. And then I'm going to use my tissue paper, the edges, the sharp edges of the tissue paper, to create some marks. If there's a lot of water, I might need to press on the paper more. Okay, let's do this big confident mark here. Put a squeaky tissue paper here. It's nice and soft. And the other side as well. If I'm touching up the darker tones, I need to rotate my tissue very frequently in order to have more cleaner edge. Just give yourself a bit of freedom if things are not picking up too much. I think my paper is drying out here. That's the only disadvantage of not painting a surface with water. I think that's my lesson learned as well here. And then I can create some more of these runny lines. I think it's also waiting for consistency of the water to settle. If it's very runny surface, you'll have one effect. If the surface is just lifting up, so just drying, that might be a different one. And do some distance waves using a thin edge of the paper, just gently touching it. I do think the palette knife does a better job. Let's try another side with the palette knife. Excuse me. And let's do some of these ones slightly stronger in contrast with the palette knife. I'm just going to vary my lines. I don't want them to be the same length. And maybe some of these lines could go stronger. Some of the edges here on the water. So yes, it is a variety of variety of strokes waiting for the surface to dry gently, or going immediately into it and lifting. You'll have slightly different textures. That's really nice. And because of the way my water separated on the horizon, I think I've got, instead of a cloud, I've got a woodland and an island. I don't like something there, I can put a slightly darker mark. My brush is splitting for some reason. I just need a tiny bit more water. Yeah, my paper buckled and I ended up with the line going a bit too low. But it might have been okay to leave it as it is. Some exciting effects happening there. Interesting splashes, interesting changes of color. Now, another interesting effect we can have to this painting, I don't want you to do anything with it. I'm just going to show it as an extra something. While the painting is wet on the foreground, we can use a watercolor pencil and sandpaper. So I've sharpened my watercolor pencil, got quite a bit of that moisture, and while the paper is still wet, we can sprinkle that sharpen those little sharpenings on the waves, just to get that sandy effect, a bit more grit in the water, a bit more of that extra texture. But because my paper is wet, dry, I'm going to put a tiny bit of fresh water just over the waves without changing anything anywhere else. And then I'll just give it a little sprinkle. And that creates a little bit of, maybe if I'll just do it a bit more exaggerate. Oh, that's maybe a bit too much. That's a volume. I need to go with some water. Okay, that's quite strong. So if I were to lift it, I'll add loads and loads more water. And then I create it as a feature because it's slightly different color as well. My watercolor pencil, I just drag it across. So that the grittiness of the dry pencil sharpenings creates something extra for the texture of the water. Just lifting it off. So you don't have to do this, just as another little example. But what we'll do on the next piece of work, we'll do something similar, but we'll just sparkle some color using light and dark colors. I'm just going to do a tiny bit more sharpening here because I smudged that area. Okay, let's see how that dries. An interesting experiment. Oh, gone again. Right, so for this image, so it's actually study 2, I got mixed up, but the 2 previous ones do look very similar in color, and I do look very similar in the application. So one follows another one, so this is just a variation, but more of this one, a slightly different line in the sky, slightly exaggerated the amount of white on the water. So it's actually should have been at number 2, and that is going to be a study 3 here, which I did call study 2 on a handout, so I apologize for that. Right, so let's do this one now by finding where the horizon is going to be. Again, probably a little bit lower than halfway through. I'm going to move this one aside, and let's do the horizon. So this is my A3 paper. Now the line does not have to be perfectly straight, so if in the past we used the masking tape to help ourselves, here it doesn't have to be because we are almost at the water level. And if some of the waves going a little bit up, so it's almost like we're in the boat, in a low boat in the sea, it's give us the impression of the waves going up and down, the horizon goes interrupted above. So let's analyze the painting now. We have, let's analyze the sky. So if we paint it again with water, definitely with quite a lot of water, because it's a larger surface, the water will be drying much quicker. Then we can go for, I think that looks like a violet and black color, and much more stronger violets there. So painting everything else with black and violet of a nice light color. Then it looks like we have much more fresher indigo with no black, maybe some more black somewhere here, maybe a big stroke going that way, maybe more violety black, but much more runnier. And then we'll lift our painting to an angle to see some of those streaks happening, okay? And then we can dry the bottom part on the right-hand side to create that light. Or simply don't paint it as low as that. Maybe we can put some water up to that angle when we're painting the fresh water first. So when we come to the stage of finishing it off, we can just soften that sharp edge, and then that water will create that little bit of darkness, a little bit of pale blue. Okay, so pale violet will be our first color. Let me just check that my brush has some of that color first before I start painting with water. So I have some violet, I have some black, and I'll dilute it so it will stay pale. Okay, so that's ready. And now I'm going to go for my big brush, and I said I'm going to keep one corner of it slightly not painted, the bottom right corner, for an effect of the open clear sky at the back. So I'm painting everything with water first. It's hard to see how much water I'm putting, so I just have to give myself reassurance by just touching it up a few times. I want it quite runny because I want my clouds to run later. I'm going to carry on painting with my big brush because the surface is going to be drying quicker, so I need to increase the size of my brush. Okay, that's my, don't forget that if you are putting the color, it's on the water, the surface will stay, so the color becomes lighter because the surface is already wet. Okay, so that's runny, nice and steady runny here. Okay, everything's just staying runny again. It just keeps everything still wet and moisturized. Now I can go back into my smaller size brush. I want some indigo, and I want some black. For this corner, I want some fresher indigo, or maybe even some blue. For that corner, I think for that corner I need a bigger brush. So I'm making decisions, adjusting to my decisions immediately. Okay, something here. If there's some sharp, almost like a sharp edge happening here, I can just add some water and see how that will run shortly. If I want to have the patches of the water to run one way, I can turn the paper and let the water run more dramatically. And then just drop the paper down. And I want to go for some more darker colors from this corner. Maybe I can turn it very shortly, opposite direction. Some more blue black. Okay, and let that one run a bit more that way. And then I want to increase my violet and black again for the bottom part. Maybe still tiny bit more here while everything is wet. So if I want things to run, I'll need to make sure I lift my paper and I encourage it by turning the paper quite steep, vertical almost. It will run much faster. You can even see how it's running now. Just picking up some more paint. Watery paint from the palette. Letting it all settle in there. I think I'm ready to fill the rest here. And then maybe let it stay flat. Or introduce some paper paint I'm collecting. And again, just angle it. The water settles in where it wants to be settled. I like the idea of maybe putting some light into the sky by adding some water here and letting the water maybe run there as well. That'd be quite nice. This is experimental work for you. So the water will be encouraged to create extra marks. And whatever it channels, for me it's very perfectly goes into the masking tape. Quite nice dramatic sky. And I'm ready to collect some of this moisture now before it settles in very dark. And then go with a fresh, clean brush and soften that edge. Well, it could have been done with tissue paper. Ideally, not just dragging, but maybe dabbing into lines. Keep rotating my tissue paper to have a clean edge. Okay, it's gone up, so I might just touch it up here. Okay, so some interesting effects happening there. I'll just have to let it settle. There's a bit of white left, which could disappear. You can play with it, but you also need to know when to stop. I'm going to take a creative risk and add extra darkness as my segment here in the center dried out quite light. So I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of darkness and let it again run. I think that's exciting. Okay, very tempted to touch it because I've got 3 similar width strokes, but I think I might end up with a very bold mark. But if I'll go with water, that might create a watery effect, which is just different to what I had before. So the temptation to keep going is strong, even for me here. But I need to stop because the dampness of the surface is changing. Okay. Still another violet mark somewhere here. Okay, definitely stop it now. Dragging it a little more here. Because every time I touch it, there's something else happening. Good, good, good. I'll just touch this one up with my tissue paper. Not only drying the surface of the very watery section, but I also want to have my sky stopping further than where it is at the moment. So if I'll bring that blending further into the light and further into the dark. Oh, I'm really happy with that now. And fingers crossed it will stay like this without drying differently due to all sorts of ways of it's changing. Right, now let's analyze the bottom part of the painting here. So what we have here is I think I would start painting it similar to what we've done before. I'll go for painting the whole surface wet because it's a large surface, 100% I'll need to do that. I'll then put quite a lot of, on the bottom right corner in the center, yellows with whatever is on my brush with my indigo. Okay, so that's nice strong yellows. Then I'll add fresher blues on the left hand side and more at the back, and then very strong darks, blacky blues, violety blues, and then start lifting. Once I've started lifting with the tissue, the wave, I can also do a bit of splashing with the palette knife, and the splashes of that yellow, stronger yellow color, I can just flick it. You don't have to do it. I'm going to give it a go and see what's going to happen on my experiment and to touch things off. So first, yellowy green on the bottom, bluey middle background, left bottom corner, super dark at the back, and then immediate lifting. So have your tissue papers ready, have your palette knife ready to get going. Okay. Right, so my big brush is back. And let's put loads of water. If I have got some color on my brush, it doesn't matter because it's going to be all having similar colors. If the paint from the previous layer runs, that's fine as well, because everything's going to be solid dark there anyway. So my amount of water is more important at this stage. So the paper is wet. Okay. So now I'm gonna go for the same big brush. I'm gonna go for yellow, bit of indigo, just to make it less fresh. And it's going to be all on this side. It does dilute the color immediately, and that's gives me an opportunity to go for stronger colors immediately over. If I need to put extra strong big line of yellow here, that's fantastic as well. I'm going to wash my brush, and I want to go for some fresh blue, or as fresh as I can get it. My blue. Okay, that looks too strong fresh, so I think a bit of indigo will still, or a hint of black with it, will be still better. So I'll work for the back here, maybe create a little bit more movement. I put in a few strokes here, some fresher blue in the bottom corner on the left. Some of that blue gonna come here as well. And finally, nice and strong, dark. Oh, I've got some green there somehow. Indigo, maybe some violet. Some nice and strong in color. In darkness. Also gives me an opportunity, if I wanted to tidy some part of the horizon, I can do that, or maybe put another darker line somewhere at the front. Okay. Now I'm gonna go very quickly with my palette knife, creating some of these bumpy shapes for the wave, because it's a very intensive color. I think I can do it better with a palette knife. And then maybe move into using a tissue paper, lifting off what I can do here. Best with a tissue. Maybe do a bit of dragging. Again, just see how your water is drying. Might be different to the consistency of water to pigment in my picture. Fresh piece of paper. Okay, this is drying, so I just want to soften those sharp edges with some water. Have some sharper marks. Okay, I've got a combination of very dry surface, well, not very dry surface, quite dry surfaces and very damp surfaces. So that creates difficulties in that consistency. Okay, I'll drag that one across. Okay. I'm ending up with two similar shape waves, so let's just add another one here. Maybe another one. And maybe some more drags. Color lifted in that horizontal way. Quite like that depth on the foreground. I've got some beautiful depths here, but again, the camera is not picking it up yet. So hopefully when it dries, we'll see it better. But I can definitely, under the foam of the waves here, I can add a darker stroke while the rest of my yellows are quite runny. And maybe do another line, more natural. Some water to soften some of these edges with a tissue. Or sponge. If you have too many sharp edges, you don't like, your sponge is your friend. Just be careful not to overdo it. For example, this looks like a too big blob of a dark. I'll break it down with a sponge. And then reinforce it with a brush. That's will be better. And again, as the painting is slightly drying, there's a bit of dampness still here. I can just do another stroke. I think here I can do another stroke. I can sharpen my darkness under the wave here. Soften it up with a sponge. So any tools, oh, what's happened there? Just a big blob of darkness, so that's better. That's becoming very exciting. As you add maybe some extra darknesses here and there. Might just straighten up my horizon here as well. And then I said I'm going to sparkle some yellow. So if I wash my brush and load it, I'll just cover this up and load it with some yellow, cadmium yellow. Okay. And then wipe it on the edge of my masking, on my palette knife on the bottom. Okay. And then I can do some flicking, especially on this darker corner. Okay, let's do the other side. Doesn't want to flick here. Okay, maybe a tiny bit. Okay, it's happening. Maybe a little bit more moisture. And do it the other way around. Okay, that's better. So I'll put it on both sides of the palette knife. I just need to rotate it while the paint is still wet on the surface. Again, I'll just wipe it here. On the larger, damper surface, the effect is stronger and it takes a little bit longer to settle it in. I start having a runniness going down. I don't want that. I want it to run, if it runs, in the way of my wave. So again, or I can help it out with a tissue, or I can just redirect, position my paper so it will start running the opposite direction. Okay, might have something stronger in color to let it run that way as well. So then everything else is settles in the direction we want it to be. So it's worth exploring and experimenting with it. Okay, it starts running again down. About to keep turning it back. I know it's a bit of a pain holding it under the angle, especially if you have a bigger board. I'm quite happy with the effects here. Maybe last little touches up while things are still a little damp. I think this mark looks a little bit lonely on its own. So if I'll soften part of it, might not be as jumpy. That's good. I like that. See, that just gives it a nice effect of extra miracle happening in the water. You know what, I've forgotten, I've got some tiny bit of a wave growing right in front of me. I can have a tiny bit more darkness here and use my palette knife here. So again, those are little details you might have stopped ages ago. And again, or making it extra wonderful and effective, or spoiling it completely and starting from the beginning. And that's what we have to allow ourselves. Be prepared to do. Not overly worry. Just a tiny bit of that darkness there. Now this white blob doesn't make any sense. Very nice. I like that. And again, as it dries, it will give more depth as certain contrasts are not as strong or too strong in comparison to the others. I think that's will come out pretty good. And I'm going to stop at this one now as well. There's loads of playfulness on the water. I think my sky ended up a little bit lighter than I intended to, but it is working. And also I think I've got something sticking out here on the horizon. Might just soften that line. Okay. Or maybe be extra brave and do something else to my sky here. On this dark corner, let me just photograph it first before I go extra. I'd like to do maybe a little bit of extra darkness in here. Let me photograph it first and then I'll make my final decision with a straw. Yeah, as the painting is drying, I don't think I need to add anything else to the sky. It's created its own atmosphere. I've got some lighter sky, but you've got some transparent waves. I could have played with some darkness on the water there, but I'm quite happy with how it is settling in.